Right. Hey guys, welcome back. It's a little bit overcast right now, a little bit cloudy, but the clouds are moving to the east and we've got nice clear skies behind it. So I'm going to attempt to set up tonight. I've done this video now 3 or 4 times and I've had problems with the autofocus on my camera. I've had problems with, as soon as I get set up, it just clouds over. So I'm avoiding the rush. It's already cloudy, so if I set up, maybe the opposite will happen. I don't know. This is Florida. So tonight I'm going to be using some of the gear that we've already talked about for the beginner. The only thing I'm doing different than we've discussed before is I'm actually using one of my telescope tripods. And the reason for that is I'm using my Manfrotto for the video camera. So basically, when I set up for astrophotography, I like to have my tripod as low as I can. Unfortunately, about 20 feet in front of me right now is my house, and I can't see Polaris from a low tripod. There's a little bubble level right here on the side of this guy. It's kind of about half critical to get this thing leveled up. It's not super critical because we're going to make some fine adjustments, but I want to get it as close as I can before I even start. Typically, I want to get this thing as sturdy as I can, as low as I can, and as level as I can. That actually looks pretty good right there. It's going to get knocked around a bit when I put everything else together. So I'm not going to get super crazy with it right now. All right. Fancy case, don't mind the fancy case. It came from Harbor Freight, so it's not all that fancy, but it was cheap. This is going to get a bracket in it, and before I put the bracket in it, I want to take the lens cap off, because once you get the bracket off, or on, it's nearly impossible to get that thing off. The scope that's in the middle of this thing is used to polar align. I've got a couple of pictures that I'm going to put up from a previous polar alignment that have a really good example of what the polar clock utility looks like versus what the view through the scope should look like. So before I get too much further along, I'm going to use my compass app. I'm going to align my mount to true north, not magnetic north. The app has a function that allows it to go to geographical north. What you're going to want is geographical north. Next in line is the declination bracket. The reason I'm using the declination bracket as opposed to the ball head adapter is I'm going to be using kind of a big camera lens tonight. It's not especially long focal length, but it's a all metal construction camera lens that just weighs a ton. It's huge. And again, this is something I've done this 100 times, so I kind of know where my balance points are, and I'm just going to get it roughly there. And as soon as it gets really fully dark, I'll go ahead and polar align this. But until then, I can't really do much with it. I'm going to balance it all out now. Let me just grab my camera. This is what I'm going to be using tonight. So I'm going to very carefully attach this puppy so as not to drop it. I've done this before. What I'm going to be shooting tonight is the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. And I happen to know that it runs nearly exactly overhead. So when I go to balance my camera and my mount, I want to make sure that my camera is actually pointing the way that I'm going to be shooting. If this were my telescope, then I would be balancing this in this axis as well as the whole thing in this axis. And the reason I'm not doing that here is because I can't balance something that's mounted with all of the weight on one side of it. There's just no way. If I'm shooting with a big zoom lens that happens to have a mid mount, a lens mount, a lens shoe, whatever you want to call it, tripod shoe on the lens itself, then that tends to balance out a little bit more. And I can also rotate my camera to hit certain angles. I don't have that in this setup, so I'm just kind of stuck with whatever framing that I have, because I can't turn this guy any direction other than what you see. So what I am going to do though is balance it side to side. And the reason you want to balance this is because this is a gear driven mount, and the gears are not overly robust. If the mount is way heavy this direction and it's moving in this direction, it's actually pulling back against the gears. Worse yet, if the mount is, or if the camera is very heavy in this direction, it's going to be pushing against the gears and overriding the gears. Eventually it's going to wear my gears out and it's not going to be fun. This is actually fairly decently mounted and balanced. What I want is either balanced like this, or I want it slightly biased to the east. East is that way right now. It's better to pull against the gears rather than push against the gears. So as your mount progresses this way during the night, it's better to have the weight a little bit that way, so you're pulling against the excess weight rather than having the weight push it down, because the farther it gets this way, the faster it's going to push it and it's going to get your tracking all out of whack. So I'm kind of happy with that. It's a little bit biased to the east, and I'm okay with that. So for now, we're going to let this setup sit for probably about another hour, half an hour, 45 minutes somewhere. When I have Polaris visible, I'll be able to polar align it. And then probably around midnight tonight, I'm going to get Pleiades coming up just over this huge, humongous tree in my yard that's not really conducive to astrophotography, but I like it, so I'm not going to cut it down. It took us a long time to get it that big. But yeah, Pleiades will pop right over the top of that thing at about midnight, and I should be able to get 3 or 4 hours on it, no problem. This lens, I'm running it at f2. It's a really low f-stop, so it's going to allow a huge amount of light in, and I'll be able to run this with 30-second exposures. If you're using like a larger telephoto lens, one of the cheap kit lenses, like a 75 to 300 Canon, they usually run, if you're imaging at say 200 millimeters, you're going to be running probably somewhere in the neighborhood of f-stop of 5.6 or 6.3. So you may want to stretch your image out to say 1 minute exposures. With no tracking, this mount is fully capable of 1 minute exposures with no problem. Now, the last piece of the equipment that I don't have on yet is the intervalometer. This little guy. Once I get closer to actually taking the pictures, I'll pop this guy on, show you how I program it for the images that I'm going to take, and we'll go from there. This is also an app-based mount. I can control it with my smartphone and connect from a port in the side that's called the snap port to the intervalometer port on my camera. And I can program through my smartphone a series of photos, and this thing will take them according to that. So I can set the duration, the time in between, the number of pictures that it takes, and it's really a great app. I'm not using it here purposely so that I can show you just a basic setup tonight. All right, guys, it's about an hour later. I've come out. I'm going to go ahead and polar align right now. I'm still not going to be imaging for a couple hours on Pleiades. I may find something to do in the interim, but Pleiades is my main target for tonight. When I bring you over here and show you the polar alignment, there are going to be 2 main adjustments that you can make to the mount to get you polar aligned, to get your Polaris centered in the polar clock, as we saw earlier. First one is going to be the altitude adjustment. The altitude adjustment should match your latitude. Mine is 27.5 degrees here in South Florida. So 27.5 degrees is going to be my rough adjustment for this. The other is going to be the adjustments that move left and right, and those are just fine-tune adjustments. There's 2 screws on each side. They're pushing against a pin inside the mount, and they're literally just moving the back end of the mount to the left or right to adjust. So while I'm making those adjustments, I'm going to be looking through the polar scope. And I do apologize for the red light, but I am trying to save my night vision as much as I can. And when you're doing this, you're going to want to invest in some kind of red light source if you need to see anything. If you drop something on the ground, if you need to walk away, use a red flashlight, use a red headlamp. I've got a really great one that I can recommend from Walmart of all places. It's by Ozark Trail. It's rechargeable, and it's red, white. It's a great little thing for about 20 bucks. If I think about it, I'll throw a picture up. But otherwise, this is just pretty simple. You will also notice, please notice, that there is no camera strap attached to my camera anywhere. That camera strap dangling down can catch on any number of things on your rig, and as your mount is moving, it can bind the gears. It can actually, if it catches on something silly that might collapse a leg of your tripod, you take a really good chance of losing $1,000 or more worth of gear. So please, use a little bit of common sense. Take the strap off your camera. I implore you. All right, guys, so right now I'm pointing north. I'm roughly set to the altitude that I need to be. I'm just going to look through the scope while I fine-tune the adjustments. Again, I'm going to basically just loosen. This is just a tightening screw that allows me to turn this knob to adjust the altitude as I need to. And then these 2 guys here, they turn both at the same time, or you're going to loosen one and tighten the other one to move you side to side. There are 2 little teeny screws that go through that go to a central pin, and that's just how this thing works. Very fine adjustments. So I'm going to look. Actually, I'm not far off. That I don't even have to adjust. I'm going to tighten it back up. And as for just ever so slightly there. All right, once I get these right where I need to, again, I looked at my app. I know that I'm just past 9, where Polaris should be on the polar scope clock face, but should be just past 9 at this point. And once I get it there, I'm going to opposingly tighten these screws. When you're adjusting them both in the same direction, and then when you get it, you just tighten both of them. Should put you right where you need to. After you tighten it, double check it. Actually, I just messed it up. Double check it, and we're actually pretty good. I'm happy with that right there. And that is pretty much it. Okay, right now this looks just like the picture I showed you a few minutes ago. In the next video, I'm splitting this up because right now I'm running quite a bit long, but in the next video, what I'm going to go over is framing your target, taking your calibration frames, your darks, your bias, your flat frames, and then we're going to stack those in Deep Sky Stacker and do a simple stretch in GIMP that will give you at least a usable image, a good image that you can share with your friends. I'm not going to go into processing yet. There's way too many people out there that are just insanely better at processing than I am. I'm not the guy to give you the processing tutorial, but I will get you an image that is usable, that you can share. I appreciate your time and your patience. All right, until next time. Clear skies and heavy weights.